Now, how many of you have ever been to a corporate retreat or a conference? Hands up. Oh, most of you. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Us organizers, we pack those days to make the most of your time with us. Sessions start at like 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. Dinner's at like 6:30, and then there's networking afterwards. Usually these events end with some kind of cup of cheer with your colleagues or newfound friends. My team have been organizing these types of retreats for over 10 years, and Anne-Marie, our coordinator, is one of the most efficient women you've ever met. She's the type of person where you really don't want to volunteer to help because you know you can't do it with the level of precision that she puts into it. Kind of makes you a bit uncomfortable. And at the same time, she makes everyone feel so cared for. She always sits at the back of the room, right by the door, so if a client needs a quiet word in the hall, she's right there to help them. And that's why when I came down from breakfast, I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. Anne-Marie wasn't in her usual spot, and there were agendas from yesterday scattered all over the table. Now, hers is not the story I'm going to share today, but I can say without tears that security helped me break into her hotel room. However, she had passed peacefully in her sleep. And that day, it was my honor to give her the dignity and to care for her. It involved coordinating with the hotel conference staff. We had the police in. We had to have the investigators come. There was a coroner. I got to tell you, for all the times that I have watched Law & Order and they had those tiny little notebooks, I always thought that was a stage prop. But no, they really do pocket-sized little notebooks. Yeah. June 7th just seemed to keep going. It was the longest day ever, and I really needed a rest. My plan was to go on vacation, and I was going to have the best vacation of my entire life. I was going to live every day to the absolute maximum. Now, how many of you here know about Jean-Baptiste Day? Yeah, a couple of you. It's a holiday in Quebec. It's on June 24th, and I gotta say, it makes for the ideal holiday because a week later is Canada Day, right? Two stat holidays. Yeah, it works out really nicely. So we decided on Old Montreal, and here we are. It is nice morning, sun's peeking in. We've got a big adventure planned for the day. And as I'm getting dressed, I look down and I have the complete shock of realizing that my nipple is facing the wrong direction. Yeah, so what do? I go right in there, poking around, and I felt nothing. So I was like, okay, this is weird. I'm gonna go to Dr. Google, because that's what you do, right? And I was like, oh, an infection, that's like the most likely cause. Okay, I can cope with that. But 48 hours later, the pain started. And this time, you could actually see the lump under the skin. And it was really big. It was 1.5 inches. Yeah, oh wow, I was right. I felt terrified. So what do? We're not coming back from holiday until after the July long weekend. So I called my doctor and I booked an appointment for July 2nd. And instead of having this magical, fully intentional holiday, I just did my best not to worry. Well, my doctor didn't see any sign of infection, but because the lump appeared so quickly, she thought, oh, maybe it's a cyst. But just to be sure, she booked me in for an ultrasound at the hospital where they could do a biopsy if needed. And I knew I wanted my mom to come with me. Now, if you've never met my mother, Kim Gordon is a remarkable woman. She is blonde, always fashionably dressed. She's 5 foot 13 inches tall. Yeah. And she wears heels. Yeah. And she gives these incredible hugs, these big bosom hugs that just enwrap you with love and enthusiasm. And because my mom's so tall, I always feel like a little kid again. Now, that ultrasound turned into a mammogram, and unfortunately the biopsy. They actually inserted a microchip into the lump so they could track it, and that needed a second mammogram to make sure it was in the same place. That last technician, she with watery eyes, she gave me a really big hug and she told me to be strong. So when I got back out into the waiting room, I just collapsed into my mom's arms and I said, "I don't want it." And then I just burst into tears. My family doctor actually called me at home that night and she wanted to give me some advice on how to heal from the biopsy, but she also wanted to give me some advice on how to cope with the wait, because it was going to be a few more days before we got the results. So you can imagine the summer of 2024 was turning out to be the worst ever. But the thing I've learned about stress is that it's easier to manage when you choose your perspective. When you get curious, when you feel fear, you can move from the worry into action. And when you, no matter your circumstances, you can always look for a glimmer of joy or gratitude to brighten your day. When we finally did get the results that the lump was cancer, it was going to require a very extensive treatment plan. I was going to need chemotherapy, immune therapy, surgery, radiation, hormone therapy. And my doctor, initial surgeon, actually didn't think she'd be able to save my nipple, which is why I'm so honored to be here tonight. I will always remember, because it was right before the civic long weekend. Honestly, this thing loves holidays. We had a huge party planned because it was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. We went straight from the doctor's office to their house. We didn't need to speak any words. They knew. My spouse, he burst into tears, and I just went straight to Mom for a hug. She told me afterwards that she actually went weak at the knees, but my mom stood tall, and she just held me tight. See, the thing is we all face shifts in our priorities. It's how we respond to change. It really depends on our perspective. And the thing about priorities is that they are never static. After hosting dozens of workshops on the topic of priorities, what I can say is that we are always in conflict. So, by show of hands, I'm going to ask you to tell me what your priorities are. So it's going to be right hand if it's health, okay? Left hand if it is family and relationships. For those of you who it's a tie, because there's always someone who's like, "Oh, I don't know, I care about them both." Okay, both hands, it's okay, ties are okay. And if it's none of those, hang tight, because I'm going to come back to you after. Okay, are we ready? Okay, right hand for health. Yeah, a couple of you. Left hand for family and priorities. Yeah, I'm feeling a few. How many are tied? Oh, a lot more of you. Yeah. Okay. And thank you for everybody. And for those of you where priority is not one of those, I want you to come find me afterwards on the break. I'm sitting right over there because I would love to hear all about it. My health is my number one priority. But those moments when I'm working on a project and I'm deep in flow or I'm working to a deadline, that likely becomes my only focus until some alarm on my phone reminds me that I have other responsibilities I need to go to. So, how many of you have ever had that, where your career suddenly hijacks your true priorities? Yeah, oh, I'm hearing some murmurs, I'm seeing some hands. Yeah, and this is the challenge. You see, our plates are already full, not to mention the effect that other people's priorities have on us. Yeah, I'm getting some head nods for that too. There is so much that demands our attention. But the thing is our priorities tend to change depending on the role that we're holding in that moment. So are you wearing the hat of parent? Or are you a leader? Or are you unexpectedly affected by illness? Today, I really want to share a couple of tips for how you can choose your perspective to help manage the change. In my work as a facilitator and an educator, I see a lot of leaders whose health slowly erodes when they have too many priorities. Their voice of authority fades as their resilience also starts to decrease. And eventually there's signs to the team that they're not okay. Now, resilience has a really simple definition. It's to recover from difficulties and adapt to change. I happen to think it's an overused word, It's highly nuanced. But then what does it really mean? I like the definition in the BMJ Mental Health Study. So get this, they define resilience as perseverance, calmness, a sense of purpose, self-reliance, and the recognition that certain experiences must be faced alone. And this study looked at this all-encompassing definition of resilience and mortality risk and found that there was an almost linear correlation between the two. So higher levels of psychological resilience resulted in a reduced risk of death across all causes: diabetes, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, and cancer. So resilience, I think, is ultimately about choosing our perspective. And we can sit in fear, and we can choose to approach things with curiosity, treating them as opportunities for learning and growth. Now, that seems easier said than done, but the thing is it's the same questions that we're asking ourselves. And so you can sit in the worry, or you can start seeking the answers to the questions and start moving to action. And there's a corresponding effect on our hormones. So, last question, how many of you know of the amygdala response? Only a few of you, but how many of you have heard of fight or flight? Oh yeah, all of you. And that's just it. We can let go of this stress response and move into our prefrontal cortex, which is our creative thinking center. And it's this subtle shift in our thinking from the stress to the creativity that is an important part of our mental health and managing stress. And I had a lot of stress about my first chemo appointment. So, things that I knew. My dear friend Dwayne, who's here tonight, had told me that I'd likely be hooked up to, it was going to take a long time. I'd be in a reclining chair. I was like, okay, I can handle that. But for some reason, I had this weird image that I'd actually be hooked up to a dialysis machine. I don't know why, but I was so worried about how I was going to go to the bathroom. I also wanted to know, would it sting? And how would I feel afterwards? And when would the side effects kick in, like losing my hair? And also, what about this chemo fog that everyone talks about? And that's why I have my notes with me tonight, because I'm still in chemotherapy. And my questions just kept coming. And I knew I had a pivotal choice to make, because my perspective would really influence my ability to handle the stress of this journey. And so, these were my choices. I could sit in my worry, and I could be sad and angry that this was happening to me, or I could take an action. And I decided to do the latter. And I got a notebook, and I started writing down all the questions that I had. And instead of being filled with worry, I got curious. And I wanted to know the answers. And let me tell you, that led to a lot more questions, because then I wanted to know who could help me find the right answers. Because I got a pretty extensive medical team. I've got a surgeon, a radiation oncologist, a medical oncologist, an oncology dietitian, and I have a case nurse. And many of them, I discovered, all have a very specific lane, so you gotta be careful what questions you ask to which one. I also knew that not every internet site would be reliable, and what advice from people would be valid, because let me tell you, when you get diagnosed with cancer, you get a lot of advice from people. My curiosity actually ran as deep as the fear, but I did not feel afraid. Instead, I relied on a tool that I knew had worked well for me in the past. And I turned to the last page of that notebook, and I started writing down something that brought me joy. And the very first thing I wrote down in that notebook was that this did not happen to me in 2020. And I knew I'd run out of room in this notebook between my questions at the front and the joys at the back. But the thing is I knew that continually writing down my thoughts was going to help me reframe my perspective, and I knew it was going to help me manage my stress. See, I believe it's possible to always find glimmers of joy, even when your circumstances are really difficult. Because when you choose your perspective, it becomes easier to find those moments of joy. And they don't always need to be significant. Sometimes they can look like gratitude, like for your family doctor who called to check in on you while she was away on vacation. This concept of glimmers was first introduced by social worker Deb Dana as these micro moments of joy that make us feel happy, hopeful, and safe. It's a way of actually contributing to our reduced stress. If you can believe it, we can soothe our own nervous system with our thoughts. So, when you notice one of these glimmers, just pause and breathe. And just take that moment to feel the joy. That ability to enjoy yourself in no matter your circumstances, and in particular in really hard times, I think is part of the duality of life. And to quote Mayor Quimby of The Simpsons, which is one of my favorite quotes, it can be two things. My mom, though, she was also really stressed. Chemotherapy was something she wished she could take away from me. But it was an experience that I had to face alone, but not by myself. My mom comes with me to all my treatments, and she holds my hand. And we pack coloring books, and we talk for hours, and we genuinely have a really nice time together, despite my being hooked up to an IV. And so the next time you're faced with a really stressful situation, like I was on the perfect vacation, and waking up to find your nipple facing the wrong direction, remember that you can choose your perspective to help manage the stress. And there's two ways that you can do that I have found really helpful. The very first one is to get curious when you feel fear. When you seek answers to your questions, it's much easier to move from worry to action. And the second one is to choose to be joyful. No matter your circumstance, there is always a glimmer of joy or gratitude that can brighten your day. Again, my name is Brooke Gordon, and thank you very much.